So let's go ahead and look at these three questions. We can add more if we need to. I picked question 4 because it makes you work with zero factor. So let's take our time and remember the steps that we use to solve an equation by zero factor. So here's what we've got. We've got our equation here. Now, directions say solve it by zero factor. So what do we need to do? Well, in the name it says zero factor, right? So that means we have to set it to 0 and then we have to factor. This one is going to make you factor by grouping because of that 2 out front. So that 2 we're going to have to split up the middle. So the first thing we do is we rewrite this being equal to 0. And now we've got 2x squared minus 21x plus 49 equals 0. And then we look at what we've got. And we always ask ourselves this question first. Do we have anything that'll factor out? We have a 2, a 21, and a 49. Well, they have nothing in common. If this would have been, let's say, a 7, then we could have divided everything by 7. But we weren't that lucky, so nothing will divide out. So what do? We want to use zero factor. So we take our first number times our last number. And 2 times 49, well, that's a 98. And it is a positive 98. So what are the signs going to be? Can someone tell me? Are they the same or are they different? It's a positive 98, so what does that tell you? They're going to be the same, right? Why? Because 2 negatives or 2 positives multiply together to give you a positive. Now we look at the sign in the middle. Sign in the middle is negative. So that means these are both going to be what? Negative. So we know they're both negative. Right? We rewrote it and moved things around. Okay, so they're both negative. Now we need to find our numbers. We need 2 numbers. They're going to multiply together to give you 98. Add together to give you that 21. So we'll start with 2. Since it's an even number, we'll start with 2. Now that's not going to work, okay, because that's 2 and 49. We just keep going until we find it. How about 3? 3 doesn't work. How about 4? Doesn't work. How about we try 14, because it has a 7 in there. Okay, 14 and 7. Does that work? Yes, because 14 plus 7, what is that? 21. We know they're both going to be negative, so we need a negative 14 and a negative what? 7. And I just went through and I checked all the numbers until I found it. I could have checked every single one in between, but I kind of looked at it and I said, well, that 98, when I divided by 2, I saw the 49. So I knew it had a factor of 7 in it. So then I tried 14, and 14 happened to work. So now we have our numbers, right? Because 14 and 7 makes it 21. Sign in the middle is negative, so they're both negative. Now we can split that 21 up. And it's a negative. So we have a 2x squared out in front. That stays the same. We have a 49 on the end. That stays the same. And then we have a minus 14x and a minus 7x. Is everyone okay with that so far? Do we see how we split that up? We're just doing this as kind of a review. We're going to look at some more of these today when we look at our practice exam. Now, what we do is we factor it by grouping. So we're going to group the first 2 together, and we see what's in common. A 2 and a 14, what do they have in common? 2, and they also have an x, so a 2x comes out. So that came out, 2 came out, so that left you then with an x minus 7, isn't it? Now the next 2 pieces we have to be careful, because it begins with a negative. And notice the 7 here is negative, so we're going to factor out a negative 7. And that's going to switch our signs, and that's going to make that x minus 7 in the parentheses. Those go together since they're the same. And now we have x minus 7. Okay. And we've got 2x minus 7. I guarantee that someone will make this mistake. Someone is going to tell me that one of the solutions is x equals negative 7. Is x going to equal negative 7? No. Why not? Because we have to set it to 0 and move it over. But I guarantee that someone will write down one of the solutions is x equals negative 7, and it's not. What we do, and it's a commonly made mistake, well, let me write it right here. It's still saying it right. Let me write that, so that's x minus 7 equals 0, so we have to move it over. So then one solution is x equals 7. Okay, so you have to move it over. Commonly made mistake, though, I see it happen all the time in all the algebra courses, is someone will look at that and they'll say x equals negative 7, and it's not. You have to move it over. That's why I physically write it out each time and move it over. Move that 7 over there. So 2x equals 7. Divide by your 2, and your second solution is x equals 7 over 2. So double check and make sure you got those two solutions. One of them is 7, and one of them is 7 over 2. Is everyone okay with how I did that? The most commonly made mistakes, though, are going to be with the signs. So make sure. That's why I write it out. I write it out here. I don't just jump to my answer. I write it out so I remember to mentally change that over. So move that over, and that gives you x equals 7. I picked that one because that was the most difficult of the 0 factors that I gave you. Someone asked about 13, which is using the quadratic formula. Now, I made these multiple choice just so you could get the answers to match up a little bit easier. This way you knew if you made a mistake. So we've got 4/9 x squared minus 3/4 x equals a negative 1. So what do we need to do? Well, we want to make sure that we don't have any fractions in the quadratic formula. So first thing we do is we must clear out our fractions. And how do we do that? Well, we look at what we've got in our denominators. Oh, that should be I think I flipped them around here. That should be a 4/3 there. My mistake. Yep, not 3/4. 4/3 there. So we have a 9 and we have a 3. So least common denominator is going to be a 9. So we're going to have to multiply everything by a 9. So multiplying through, the 9's cancel, and that leaves you with a 4x squared. 9 divided by 3, that's a 3. 3 times a negative 4, that makes it a negative 12x. And here's where students make a mistake. Many times students will write down a negative 1, and that's not correct because we have 9 times a negative 1. That makes it a negative 9. The most commonly made mistake is someone will forget to distribute that 9 through. Now what can we do? Well, we want to use the quadratic formula. We've cleared out our fractions. So now to use the quadratic formula, we need to set this equal to 0, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and add that 9 over. Okay, and if I add that 9 over, then I get 4x squared minus 12x plus 9 equals 0. A is 4, B is a negative 12, C is 9. I like to write out our formula. X equals minus B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC all over 2A there, right? So there's our formula. So what did we do? We cleared our fractions, and there's one like this on your exam, on your practice exam today. There'll be one like this on your exam on Thursday. So what do? We clear out our fractions. In this case, it was easy. We multiplied it by 9. Then we get our A, B, and our C. I like to write up our quadratic formula each time. That way it just reinforces it. And then I fill it in. Okay, so let's go ahead and fill this in. Watch for double negatives. So negative of a negative 12. When you have a plus or minus, then we've got the square root of negative 12 squared minus 4 times a, which is 4, c, which is 9, and that's all over 2 times 4. Right, so that's what we have there. Now, be very, very careful with the double negatives. Double negatives here are going to make this now positive. We'll rewrite it. And then we'll work with our discriminant separately. So when I rewrite that, double negatives make that positive 12. And we've got our plus or minus. 2 times 4 makes it an 8 there. And let's work with our discriminant. Our discriminant is negative 12 squared minus 4 times 9. When you square a negative, remember that fact, it becomes positive because of the parentheses. So there's that piece. 4 times 4 is 16. Times that 9 makes it another 144, doesn't it? And those subtract out and they give you what? 0. How do we finish it? Well, this one's actually easier than some of the others because we know the square root of 0 is 0. So that's gone. We don't even have to worry about it. So what is then left over? If that's gone, then we're left with 12 over 8, and that reduces down to now be a 3 over 2. And why do we have one solution? Because our discriminant was 0. Right? So it should be then choice, watch the way it's written here, it should be choice D, right? So make sure you have it in the right order. We flip things around, right? Very careful with your signs. It should be D, it looks like. One more. Someone asked about 15. And 15 also involves fractions. And we're going to have to clear them out. So 6 equals a negative 6 over x minus 1 over x squared. So we need to clear these fractions out. So let's think about what we've got. What do we have in the denominator? Do we have any numbers in the denominator? No. What do we have? X and an x squared. Now, to clear out these fractions, we need the largest denominator. So that's going to be the power that's in common, the largest power. The largest one is x squared. So we're going to have to multiply each part by an x squared. Then we'll rewrite it in the correct order, equaling 0. So the first thing we'll do is we'll distribute that x squared through, and that's going to give you 6x squared equals the x squared and the x cancel. That leaves you with a minus 6x because there's still one left over. Minus x squared and x squared cancel, and that leaves you with a 1 there. Set this equal to 0 by adding 6 and adding 1. And now we've got 6x squared plus 6x plus 1 equals 0. Okay, I'll slow down to make sure we're on the right track. Is everyone okay with what we're doing? So when I saw this, just like the previous one, what do we want to do? We want to get rid of the fractions. So either multiply by the least common denominator or the variable with the highest power. There's variables. So our variable with the highest power was x squared. So I multiplied everything by x squared. That then cleared it out. Okay, I set it to 0. Now the directions tell me to use the quadratic formula. So a is 6, b is 6, c is 1. Writing up my formula, x equals minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Fill it in with the correct pieces in the correct order. Watch your signs. Be very careful with the signs. So we have a negative 6 plus or minus the square root now of 6 squared minus 4 times a, which is 6, c, which is 1, all over 2 times 6. Okay, I'm going to rewrite it again, clean it up a bit. So we've got minus 6, then we've got our plus or minus. And 2 times 6 makes it 12 there. So there's that piece. Let's do our discriminant separately. And that's 6 squared minus 4 times 6 times 1. So that's 36 minus 24, I believe. 6 times that 4 is 24. And 36 minus 24 is 12. And it's going to be a positive 12 there. So there's that. Now that's not one of our answer choices, so we're going to have to break this down. That's why I made these multiple choice. They're not going to be on your exam, but I made these homework questions multiple choice just so you could see if you were even on the right track or not. And so this doesn't match up with any of the answers, but we're going to make it match up to the answers because we're going to take that 12 and we're going to break it down. Now 12 will factor down into 4 and 3, and 4 is a perfect square of 2 and 2. So now that breaks down into a negative 6, right? 2's can come out. Square root, we've got a 3 left over 12. Still doesn't match up with any of our answers here. We're going to break it up. We're going to try to reduce this down. So when we split this up, we have minus 6 over 12, right? Plus or minus 2 squared of 3 over 12. Negative 6 over 12, that's negative 1/2. Plus or minus, 2's can cancel, square root of 3 over 6. That's still not one of our answers. It is a correct answer, though. This is a correct answer. It's just not the answer that they have. Now, how do you make it look like the answer that they have? Well, if you look at your answers here, what do you notice? When you look at all these choices, they are all over what? Over one denominator. So we need to make ours turn back into one denominator. So to do that, all I'm going to have to do to get into one denominator, this is a 6, this one's a 2. I'm going to multiply this part by a 3 over 3. That's going to turn it back into one denominator, which is then a minus 3 plus or minus square root of 3 over 6. And that should be one of the answer choices there. This is the same as that. It's just written differently. So when I look at my answer choices, I see this is not one of them, but I look and I saw that they were all under one fraction bar. So I just multiplied this by 3 over 3 because we need a common denominator of a 6 there. And that gave you that, which that then should come out to be